Hello, so this is the first video I've posted in ages. I actually can't remember the last time I posted a video, and if you follow me on Instagram or if you know me personally, then you'll know that I have been in the process of moving to Ireland, and I spent much of the latter part of last year exploring Ireland and just working out where I wanted to put roots down. And I have found a place, and I've been here for 2 weeks, and I am really starting to ground, connect with the land, and settle in. So yeah, and this video is something I've spoke about before. I'm sure I have other videos talking about this, or referencing the false light, but it's definitely something that I have seen more of recently, and I think there's a number of reasons for that, which I will cover. So I just want to start by just talking about, okay, so what actually is the false light? And this is a term you may have heard before, likely if you're in those sort of spiritual communities, new age communities. And the false light just refers to beings or energy or information which is masquerading as divine, and it actually has more nefarious intentions. So this information is contained in what we might refer to as grids, and people can plug into those grids and start downloading information, start attaching or being attached to by false light energies and entities. And there's so many different sort of variations and forms that these things can take, but ultimately they have an intention to deceive and to harvest energy, and to it's about gaining control, and it's about maintaining separation on this earth plane. So it's never in a it's never coming from a positive place, and that's how you can detect false light, is because behind it the intentions are not pure. They are not for the highest good of humanity and the evolution of the planet. They are for the purposes of separation and hierarchy and maintaining power structures. So I think the reason why we're seeing a bit of a rise of it right now is because partially because the North Node is in Pisces, and that propels us towards spiritual information and that sort of seeking of truth and more immersion into the etheric planes. And so when people are often first on their journeys of awakening and starting to delve into whether it's astrology or the new age or whatever form of spirituality, but they start to open up more and they start to desire that sort of contact with their spirit guides and things like that, that is most often where you see false light coming in. However, it can also come in when people are much further along their journey. That happens a lot, especially with channelers. It happens a lot with people who are spiritual teachers, spiritual leaders, etc. And, if you are, everyone has blind spots, and sometimes we don't look as deeply as we need to at certain things. And that is often where you'll find false light coming in, and people starting to think that they are ascended masters or gurus, or trying to place themselves above others. That is a fundamental core of false light energy, is hierarchy, and is this top-down approach to the spiritual systems, essentially. And so yeah, when you see people trying to sort of put themselves above others, or say that they are the only ones who have access to certain information, or they are the only ones that have the keys to certain places or certain information, and that nobody else can access it, or the only place you can access it is through them, that kind of thing is often very closely affiliated with false light. It also can take place within organized religion, in as much as it can take place within new age spirituality and even esoterica. It can very much take place within organized religion as well. Christianity is major for false light, and that sort of concealing of evil deeds or acts through this sort of masquerading as being better than or higher than or more connected to God. Islam, Judaism, all the major religions have threads of false light in them, all of them. None are absolved of that at all. And so often symptoms of false light can look like people who maybe almost seem like they're in a little bit of a psychosis. That's definitely one of the ways that false light can come through, and especially if somebody is very, very deeply plugged into it, that is one of the ways that it will start to show itself or manifest. And I deal with people who have a lot of entity issues. I deal with that stuff all the time in sessions with clients, clearing out entities. False light is a lot harder to clear than entities. Entities are actually really easy to clear once you know how, whereas false light is, I say easy, I shouldn't, tar it all with the same brush. It's once you know how to do it, once you have a lot of practice, it is much easier to clear entities compared with false light. False light is a nightmare. Like, to try and unplug people from all of these grids, it has this sticky, icky kind of energetic feel to it. And most often it comes when people they have really deep self-worth wounds and they are trying to fill it with something else. They're trying to fill it with this idea that they're really spiritually advanced, or they're way ahead of all of these other people, and they're targeted, and they're like it's kind of that targeted individual paranoia kind of mindset as well that can really come through with false light. Also, people that call in angels all the time. I generally say to people, don't call in angels unless you know that what you're calling in is 100% of the light. And often people call in angels and they're actually calling in false light beings and entities without realizing it. And maybe they just haven't cultivated enough discernment to be able to tell what is what. And often I find with angels as well, it's this sort of mentality people have of like, they need saving, or they're not powerful enough themselves, they're disempowered, they're not sovereign, and so they're like, angels, please come and save me. And then these more trickster kind of beings, white lighters, luciferics, these are the most common kind of entities you'll find within those false light grids. They swoop in on that and they gradually start to leave their imprint and their energy and get their talons in to a person, and it's really unpleasant. Actually, I always feel a lot for people who get stuck in these grids because it's not a nice place to be, and they often have built relationships with these beings. They often think that it's their guides. They often think that it's somebody who or a being that has come through to support them on their journey, and you have to break the news that actually, no, you're not talking to who you think you're talking to. And so, yeah, discernment is always the number one spiritual teaching that we should endeavor to learn before anything else, before wanting to know our guides, all of that kind of stuff. And, I think it's kind of tricky because it is as well just part of our development. Like, we have to encounter these things in order to know what is of the real light and what is of the false light. And so, if you are connecting with a being and first of all they seem very loving, and these beings are very, very convincing, they are very, very good at what they do. They will tell you everything that you want to hear, that you are special, that you have a special mission, that you have a special purpose, that all of these people, they don't understand you, and they're you're kind of better than other people, or you're different. It really plays on that sort of special unicorn syndrome that a lot of people in the new age can have as a coping mechanism, because maybe they have always felt different, or they have always felt like they didn't fit in. And so they will these false light beings will start to feed that information through. And then they will start to give information which maybe it just doesn't feel quite right, or they'll ask you to do something which maybe it hits a chord with you where you're like, I'm not sure about that, or it will start to feel more controlling. And that is them gradually trying to gain that sense of power over you. And so, whenever you're communicating with a guide, whenever you're communicating with a spirit, you always have to be diligent about the information that they're giving you. And it's okay to just be like, I don't know right now, like, can you just get out of my field? And if they are of the highest, if they are genuinely someone from your team, from your spirit team, or an extension of you, they will go. They will just go, and they'll be like, okay, cool, see you later. And they will either try and make the connection again when you're ready, or you can initiate that yourself. But they will not be pushy. They will not be trying to control you or trying to get you to separate yourself from others. That is one of the main sort of symptoms of false light, is separation. So say you meet a group of people and you're like, oh, they seem really nice, and we feel like we have these codes to exchange together, we have some of the same interests, and then all of a sudden you start getting these thoughts of like, oh, but I don't think I can trust them, or I think they've got ulterior motives, or all this kind of stuff. That can be a good indication that you are plugging into a false light grid. Obviously, sometimes, yes, some people we come across you don't want to engage with, and it's your intuition is telling you to distance yourself, but your intuition will never be like, don't trust this person, keep your distance, stay away. It'll never be in that sort of suspicious, almost like a little bit bitchy kind of tone. Your intuition will be like, don't think we should really spend our time with this person, because they're coming from a shadow place, and I can really sense that, and actually it doesn't feel like it'll be expansive for me to share my time with this person. That's a completely different vibe from stay away from that person, and guard yourself from them, and all that kind of stuff is often coming from the false light. Our intuition will never scare us. It may warn us or offer almost like totems or omens, or some kind of information, but it won't, and that information we receive, we might be like, have a fear response to, but it won't come through on that fearful vibration. Our intuition just doesn't operate on that same frequency. So if you're experiencing a lot of like fearful thoughts, which you think are your guides, or you think are intuition, it just remembering that won't be how it comes across. Our intuition is quiet. It's a quiet whisper. It's not something that, it's not like this loud shout that's trying to come through like this sort of controlling or separating kind of lens. And so I think as well, it's really important for practitioners, for us to be able to spot when somebody is plugged into the false light, when they're talking to false guides, when they are doing things, certain practices, like whether it's calling in angels or whatever it is. It's really important that we're able to sense that in somebody's field, because there could be, maybe they're coming to you with an issue and it's actually being caused by this false light. It can do so much distortion to our lenses and the way that we read information, and it can completely hijack a person's energy field. And so it's really important for us as practitioners to be able to recognize when somebody is in that state, when they have been heavily plugged into false light. And depending on kind of how far this stuff has entered into their field, some of the symptoms might look like kind of glassy eyes, or that sort of wild kind of dissociated kind of look can really be an indicator of false light. If somebody is acting very like suspicious and untrusting, and maybe that's a shift in how their behavior was before, If it's a client you've been working with for a while, things like that. That's a really good indication that there's some kind of false light thread or false light grid that may be at play here. And in order to dismantle those grids, in order to unplug from them, whether you're helping someone else unplug from them or you're unplugging from them yourself, the first step is always call all of you back to you and send back everything that isn't yours. And you may have to do this multiple times. And then it is always a case of like literally extracting that false light energy from somebody's field. You may have to remove contracts with entities. Often they come in through us agreeing to have them in our field, whether that's they've come in as false guides and we're like, yes, you can be my guide. That's a contract. So that allows that being to have access to your field, to use you as a battery pack, so always looking for different contracts which might be in place. And then really the foundational thing as well is addressing with that person what has gone on with them, that they felt the need to either call in all of this angelic, divine, etc., that they felt the need to call in stuff from a place of helplessness and really get them back onto that path of sovereignty, which, look, is not necessarily going to happen overnight, but is something that's really important to do, is for people to feel empowered in their own fields and feel as though they're the ones who actually have control over their lives. And I think it's such a huge thing in the spiritual communities. I have so many clients over the years that have come to me and been like, I just want to know who my spirit guides are. I just want to be able to talk to my spirit guides. And I understand that desire, because maybe our whole lives we felt like there was something more than just this 3D reality. And then maybe we start to, receive signs and symbols and messages, and our consciousness starts to awaken to these sorts of things. So of course we're going to be curious, and of course we're going to want to initiate that contact. And there's this, that sort of idea that somebody is always looking out for you, I think is really, there's absolutely truth to it, but it's also very intoxicating if you're somebody who has maybe experienced a lot of abuse or a lot of hurt, or whatever it looks like, a lot of damage in your life. Then that idea that, oh my god, there's these angels that are looking out for me all the time, is obviously going to draw people in and not always have the best results. And so what I would say with spirit guides as well is, it shouldn't be a relationship that you just dive into. It should be something that is built up over a period of time. It shouldn't be something that you just meet and you're just instantly have all this information or have all of this. Of course there's times where guides come through and you obviously exchange information with one another, but it shouldn't be like that sort of, oh, we're instant best friends kind of energy. Just like with another human, it's probably not going to be instant best friends, because you have boundaries, you don't actually know this person. So although you can have connections which maybe form quicker than others, it shouldn't be instantaneous. It takes time to develop relationships. And so just being wary of that. It's almost like the same with people. It's like if people are love bombing you, there's a reason for it. So if your guides start love bombing you, they might be false guides. So just being and cultivating awareness around that. Awareness is the best protection. People always ask me, oh, what can I do to protect myself? I always say awareness is the best protection. You don't have to go out there and do crazy protection rituals with the moon. You don't have to do that. Like, you really, really don't. You just have to be aware of what's going on in your field and be aware of what energy is yours and what energy isn't. That is the foundational thing that is just across the board the first and most important teaching in whether it's spiritual, development, psychic development, intuition development, etc., is being able to work out what is your energy and what is not. That is the foundational, most important principle of any of those kinds of teachings. It's also important to note that false light attacks or false light grids are not personal, like ever. Like not really ever. You know, and one of the things I think people that experience a lot of false light, you know, when they're really plugged into those grids, they'll often feel like, oh my God, I'm being attacked by all these entities all the time. And it's like, it's because you're plugged into the false light. That's what it is, you know. But then they get into these traps of calling in more angels to protect them from these entities, and it just calls in more and more false light, and before they know it, they're so enmeshed with those grids. And so, you know, it's very rarely a targeted attack. That's not generally how these things work with false light. It's just that you have plugged into a grid and you are now downloading all of this information, and that could look different depending on, you know, a million different things. But it's just important to remember that as well, because it can just further embed into this, I'm, you know, I'm special and they're after my light, and, you know, all that kind of stuff that we can get drawn into in the spiritual communities. So just being aware of that as well. So yeah, I think that was most of what I wanted to cover. The other side of it as well is also with galactic guides. So, you know, always steering away from terms like the Galactic Federation or the Ashtar Command. You know, I'm someone who's very galactically connected, and I have been for most of my life, most of my conscious life. I've had experiences with beings that are star beings, you know, that aren't your elemental guides or your angelic guides, but are very much beings of the stars that are very, very cosmic. And they also you will also find grids that are associated with false light grids that are associated more with galactic beings. So that would be things like Ashtar Command, which has a very actual, you know, is also connected with those governmental grids. Lots of information on that online if you want to delve deeper into that. Galactic Federation, things like that. And I'm not saying that there aren't organizations which operate similar to a Galactic Federation. That's not what I'm saying. But that particular term itself is hijacked, is completely hijacked. Someone comes to me and says, I've been talking with Ashtar Command and the Galactic Federation. I'm like, okay, let's take a step back from this now, and just look at it in a different way, because these beings often have beings that are associated with that are often, or, you know, always pretty much, if they're coming from under those names, then they are associated with those more nefarious collectives which are trying to have more control and everything over the planet. So just being aware of that as well, whether it's, you know, angels, galactics, you know, you can even experience like false light fairy beings and stuff. I've seen that before too. So yeah, it's just always important to really be asking those questions. Don't be afraid to ask your guides or beings that you're communicating with questions. And what I find as well is you just start to notice the frequency. You don't even have to ask questions. It's just an energy. False light just has this particular energy, which I think when you first feel it, if you've not felt what real higher frequencies feel like, you'll be like, oh, it feels good. But it has this kind of buzzy, static kind of, it just doesn't feel good, you know? And you don't realize until you're unplugged from it that you're like, oh shit, that wasn't good, you know? So yeah, just being aware of that as well. And the other thing as well, I'd like to mention with with false light too, is it really hijacks or can hijack the reproductive systems. So if you have a lot of, and I'm not saying you, but I just mean the proverbial you, if people have a lot of unusual sexual kinks or thoughts around, like, kind of really intrusive sexual thoughts, which are kind of could be considered weird, or yeah, like a little bit more edgy in a way, that's often connected with the false light as well, because it harnesses our trauma. It harnesses our deepest pain and plugs into it, and then starts to feed us fantasies, essentially, whether that is that we are some reincarnated being, that we're some sort of guru, that we need to do these kinds of weird sex acts, that we need to that we're being targeted, that we should avoid people, that we need to separate ourselves, that being alone is better. All of these kinds of things can fall under those false light grids. And so just really cultivating that deep awareness of that. So often our thoughts are not our own, and I'm sure I've spoken about this in a million videos. All the videos I've done is like asking that question of, is this mine? Is this thought mine? Is this feeling mine? Is this craving mine? That is how we really start to truly connect with our sovereignty and start to pull away all of the things which are not actually authentic to us and are not actually helpful to our evolutionary path. So if you have any questions around the false light or any experiences that you'd like to share, then feel free to leave me a comment, or my inbox is open. And yeah, if you feel it's something that you're kind of dealing with on that deeper level, definitely reflecting on where that might be coming from and working out what the best way is to dismantle that, whether it's that you reach out to a healer or a helper or somebody who knows what they're talking about with this kinds of stuff, or you really start to just delve really deep inside yourself and call back all of your energy and just be really conscious of where you are extending it. So thank you so much for watching this, and take care and look after yourself.